Good day, class. So today we're going to discuss about how to think like an architect and the design process. Okay, so slowly now we have you. I think our past lessons is about space planning. So the most important aspect about space planning is how to do your bubble diagrams properly. Your bubble diagrams, class, it's really important so that you'll get the right answer or arrive at the right design solution for the problem. Okay? So let's look at this video done by an architect in the United States.
I'm an architect who loves to draw. My name is Barry Burkus. I'm in my studio in Santa Barbara, and we're going to look at a house that we designed and tell you how and why we designed the house the way it is. Clients came to us and they said, we want to build on the beach. We want to build in a place that has great ocean views. We want to build a house that allows us to bring our extended family home, but we want to have a place that's private for them also. So we looked at putting the living kitchen across the back to enjoy the view, the library.
Okay, so look at how his design process, class. So first he got the client's requirements and call this a general idea where the property will be located. So this property is located near an ocean or a beachfront. So probably when you talk to the client probably wants the kitchen and the living areas to be facing the sea also.
Enjoy the view. The stairway that went upstairs, so the master bedroom sat over the top of the kitchen area, and a guest room over the living room, and a bridge that connected that. And the guests were here, and actually another bridge that connected the guests to their own bedroom suites, which were over a motor court in the front. So as you start to, this becomes a house. It is a drawing that as you start to sketch, you draw a diagram, and the diagram becomes architecture. So what we were looking at, once again, was the ocean. That
Okay, so this is how to use your tracing paper or hopia paper properly. So what's important, class, is when you're still doing your bubble diagrams is the spontaneity of ideas. So that's the purpose. You're just doing circles because you're going to determine the interrelationships of the different spaces. Now, always remember, class, that the only thing that is constant and you cannot change are the building codes and the building laws, which is applicable in your project. But some of the spaces you have to talk to your client on how they want the ambiance of that space to be. Okay, in this case, since they're designing a beach house, probably the client wants to have maximize the frontage and have a good great view of the beach.
ran along the area here. We're looking at, once again, winds that came from the west side over here, sun that came east and
Okay. Another thing to consider, Glass, when you're doing your bubble diagrams is you have to know where the sun will pass through and where the winds will pass through. Here in the Philippines, last study and research where the wind will pass and how the sun will move. And also consider, class, when you're designing in the Philippines is that you have to consider the tropical setting. Okay, so we have a different climate compared to those who live in Europe or Japan or in China. Okay, so you have to consider these things when you design.
west. And we looked at the kitchen being on the morning side of the house. Always think about the kitchen enjoying east light. The sun is a wonderful thing to gain in the morning.
Okay, so he talked about this, the sun is a wonderful thing to gain in the morning, which is correct, class. But look, you have to look at also the context of the location where the house will be built. Okay, if you are designing a kitchen in the Philippines, you have to think where should it be best located. Okay, so when you are uh, looking for a good orientation for the kitchen, the tropical setting, probably the best location for me would be to place it in the western portion so that it would be easier to make the water uh, evaporate since it will be exposed to more heat. Okay, that's because there's probability for a lot of types of bacteria to develop class if you just let it be placed in a cooler uh, location, especially here in tropical places like the Philippines. So it's probably a good idea to place your kitchen in the west so that it would always be dry and the sun will kill germs and bacteria. Okay.
In the afternoon, the warmth in the living room. And we looked at the house as it ran the courtyard so that if the winds came, that
Okay. Look, like what I've said earlier, when you design, you have to think of the tropical context. He was saying that it would be best to place the living room in the western portion to gain more heat in the afternoon. But that's a different case here, especially here in the Philippines. Okay? They are living in a colder climate, so they would want the warmth of the sun during the afternoon. But since you're living in a tropical climate, you may want to reconsider placing your living area to somewhere which is cooler. Okay? I think we could exchange those. We should probably place the living area at the eastern portion and the kitchen area at the western portion. Okay? So that's why class, when you design, you have to think of the totality. Okay? How the spaces will be affected based on the climate, the culture, the location, and a lot of things.
we would end up being able to shelter the people around a fireplace in the courtyard that we came through from the multi-court, which was the garages in front. So very simply then, this became a living room with a fireplace sitting on the floor, seating areas around the fireplace, the dining room in this area here, the kitchen that was back in this side of the house on the east side of the
Okay, so notice Lasso, in its design, there's a fireplace because their area is cold. Compared here to the Philippines, it's already hot. So when you're living in a hot area, so what must you do to cool the house? So I think you have to limit the use of glass in such a way that you also allow air to circulate within your structure. Okay? So those are important points you must consider in designing.
sun coming in the morning, and the idea that the library on this edge of the house would enjoy the quiet, and we could block the west sun with that. But we're watching the beach, looking at the surf, looking at a pool that sits in the yard, and it became a place that water in an infinity pool poured over into the ocean visually. And then the water in the front kept the acoustics that were from the noise of the road and the train away from the inners of the house. Enter here, look to light, look to the right, the library, piano, look to the left through the dining room towards the kitchen, views up and down the coast.
Okay, so if you look at the design class, it's really nice. Okay, so it allows light to come in, which is very important. Here in the Philippines class, you also have to consider ventilation because it's hot. We're in a tropical environment. Okay, so if you just place a glass here to view the ocean and you design in the Philippines, then that it's going to be very hot glass, especially in the afternoon. Okay, so what you must do is balance it so that air can also circulate.
But all houses that we work on become diagrams that are bubbles, then start to become harder lines, and the forms start to come together. And it's an exercise in thinking with the hand and the mind that will go from just a little bit more detailed than this to the computer.
Okay, so listen to what the architect saying that the bubble diagram is the first step before you're going to finalize or formalize your floor plan. So when you do your bubble diagrams, you have to be spontaneous with your ideas. So that's why it's just a bubble diagram, so that you can make a lot of schemes and you can think freely. Okay, so that's the design process of an architect.
Computer, where it really becomes an organized piece put together by the designers that are working with me on the house. So it all begins as a pattern in a diagram. The idea of where things are and how they interrelate, adjacencies and the opportunities of the sun in the afternoon, the sun in the morning, the views to the water, and the idea that the bridge puts together the guest and the master, looking down into the wonderful views of the house. The people that have this house are wonderful clients, and it's a house that we are very, very proud of as architects. And that, I think, is the greatest reward an architect can have, is a happy client, a great building, and a place that they want to go back and visit because of the meaning of the piece that they've designed and the strength of the architecture.
Okay, so that was a really nice video class on how to do the bubble diagram. Okay, so if you want to improve your designs and how you plan class, you must really have a habit for doing your bubble diagrams correctly. Okay, so the bubble diagrams are not just there because you can place some circles, then label the spaces. So what's important in the bubble diagram is not how you draw it, but how you let your mind freely think on paper. Okay, so I think this is really related to spatial intelligence, which is a very important aspect when you're studying architecture. But since you're all in your first years, I think you have more than enough time to develop that, because you'll be spending 5 years in your study, then plus 2 more years of apprenticeship before you can take the board exam after graduation. Okay, so uh, if you're really interested in architecture class, take your time to practice, take your time to observe, then take your time to read books on space planning, because your basics will determine on how you're going to attack more complicated problems like designing airports, hospitals, malls, and others. Okay, so the residential building class is one of the smallest scopes in architecture. As an architect, you also design hospitals and bigger structures for human habitation. In such cases, you really have to have a profound understanding on the interrelationship of spaces, and you have to read the needs of the users of the facility or structure. Okay, so that is our lesson for this week class. Just wait for my announcement for our activity in the page. Take your time to reflect more on how to improve your space planning, because it's really important. Okay, once you develop that skill, um, you'll enjoy architecture. Okay, so see you next week, class, and stay safe.